Yeah, I got the whole world pissed off. Big dollars, moonwalk. Yeah, she a shorty, but I'm too tall. Big 40, shoot y'all, not me. Who's you? Come out your pocket with your keys too. Send them to heaven. I win, you lose. Yeah, I got the whole world pissed off. Big dollars, moonwalk. Yeah, she a shorty, but I'm too tall. Big 40, shoot y'all, not me. Who's you? Come out your pocket with your keys too.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Brooklyn Boxing Podcast. I am joined by Marquel Martin, CAA agent, and most notably agent to Francis Ngannou, who's fighting in a couple weeks.
Thank you, man. What's up, Pat? How you doing, man?
Good. I'm glad to have you on here. You got the LA sunny weather behind you. It's making for a good show.
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I just when the pandemic hit, I'm actually at my parents' house because my fiance and I moved in and we're buying the house from them, and it's been great just to kind of be we're about an hour outside of LA right now, so just more spacious, so just loving this Cali weather, man. I'm a Cali boy through and through. I can't get East Coast cold,
Yeah, no, I hear you. I saw that you're Cali guy from the beginning, and you stayed in that warm weather scene through college, right? When you went to UNLV and played some football there.
Yeah, the desert, man. I went to UNLV back in 05, where it was 123 degrees one day, like a record number on the field. And yeah, but I'm glad I'm not playing football in that kind of weather, but I love Vegas, man.
It's pretty funny how that worked out. Like, you went to college in Vegas and now you're in the fight game. Obviously Vegas is like, the mecca of all things fighting.
Yeah, fight capital of the world. And what's funny is, like, I didn't really know it was at the time of me just kind of going to school out there in Vegas. However, during college, we'd go out to the clubs or whatever, and we're underage. And then I remember one of my teammates, the linemen, they always ran kind of security. And my first boxing match was in Vegas at at Caesar's Palace, where they used to have like the outdoor fights. And I was like, okay, wow, like this is where, all the big boys were fighting. And interestingly enough, once I finished grad school, that's how I ended up at UFC, just because I was working at Nordstrom as a personal stylist back then, just getting my way through my master's. And one of the executives from UFC was my client, and he offered me the gig.
No way. So when you were having that conversation, it was like, were you already a fight fan, or did that just kind of, you wanted to get into that ad space or marketing space?
Oh, yeah. So I got my undergrad in advertising and marketing, and then my master's was in sports management, right? And I just knew that I've always loved sports. I grew up playing football and running track. And, after I knew I wasn't going to make it to and I had so many damn surgeries and everything, I was just like, okay, let me try to get into the sports realm, right? And I didn't know where necessarily I wanted to go. And the only sport at the time, right, this is, 2010, 2011, the only sport in Las Vegas was the UFC, right? The only major sport. And I had seen a couple, like, fights, just by going to the bar or something like that. And I remember my first fight I watched was Anderson Silva versus Vitor Belfort, where he's for kicking his damn face off, Vitor's face off. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. And it was just like pandemonium at the time. And yeah, next thing you know, I got an interview with that exec, and he offered me a job doing marketing partnerships for the UFC. And I was a coordinator there. And I was just like, okay, well, it's not the sport that I know, but I might as well give it a shot to learn. And it was probably one of the best experiences of my life because of the fact that I wore so many hats at the time. UFC is known as this global company, right? And I had the opportunity to work on sponsorships across all of those platforms. So it was hard, coming out of college to it was a steep learning curve, I should say, but I felt like I was there at like a really pivotal time, and I was blessed enough to be like just kind of good timing, right place, right time, because that's when Anderson lost to Chris Weidman. That's when Ronda Rousey just came in. That's when Conor McGregor became hot. And then, so I spent 5 years there, and it was incredible.
Yeah, it's so right. Like hearing you say that in terms of now you think of the UFC and it's like the NFL. But when you
Right.
were there, but when you were there, it's like, it was almost a startup.
Yep.
So it's crazy that you got in when you did. And obviously, from there you had a pretty crazy story within the UFC. And then also a kind of funny story I think worth mentioning, obviously, is you had a little stint on the Bachelorette, and and your conversation with Dana, right? You had to kind of go to the big boss and make sure that that was okay.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that was crazy. It was like maybe my first year working at the UFC, first or second, I can't really remember. And at the old headquarters at UFC, there was a gym underground, right? And playing football, you just kind of work out, right? So every morning I go to work out, and you'd also see Dana and the other executives kind of working out, and Dana would do his boxing and stuff. So we became kind of like, passing by, just like, "What's up, Dana? What's up, Dana?" Right? Like, and then I got a random phone call one day at my office from the Bachelorette, and like I found out later on that one of my friends kind of like nominated me, so I had no idea. I told the Bachelorette no, and then they called back, and my coworker convinced me, because she was a huge Bachelorette fan at the time. Like, you know what? Let me check this out. I asked Dana the next morning, and he was like, "Man, like, go have fun, live your life, and your job will be here when you get back." So then I told my boss that Dana White said this. He was like, "Okay, cool." And then the best part of that story that I like to share is not necessarily just because I went on this little dating show, right? Is actually when I was on my lunch break, going through kind of the process of the Bachelorette and getting ready to leave to LA. If you're familiar with that show, they require the men to wear suits, and at the time I didn't have own a suit, right? I think I was 24, 25 years old. Yeah, I can't even remember. And Dana called me and said, "Hey, I heard you don't have a suit." And I was like, "Yeah, no, it's all good." And he was like, "Well, no, I'm buying you a suit. Contact my assistant. I'm flying David August out here to the office, and we'll be taken care of." So that was when, like, we all know, again, that the close-knit family that UFC kind of was, especially at that time, how great Dana is. He gets a bad rep out there in the media and stuff like that, and he's a shark in the business realm. But if you know him personally, he's very generous like that. Like, he's super cool. And yeah, for him to buy me some expensive suits like that to a guy who's only been working at the company a year, spoke volumes. And I'll never say like a bad thing about that dude, you know what I mean, on a personal level.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. And the only thing to top that, I would say, is maybe if you had Bruce Buffer come in and give a few suit pointers, right? I mean, get a little style on there.
Exactly, man. Bruce is a legend when it comes to the suit game. I'm not touching him.
Yeah. No, but that's pretty cool, man. So when you were at the UFC, obviously it was a great experience. You had the reality TV show stint, and then you came back.
Yeah.
And then when did you really make the move in terms of becoming an agent, or starting to develop relationships with those fighters, breaking out of the UFC?
Yeah. So I came back from the show, and just kind of went back to work. Actually, I went on another show, right? And they let me do that, and I came back to work, and my job was getting sponsorship deals, right? From the Xbox to the Monster Energies of the world. That was kind of my day to day. And in August of 2016, we were bought out by WME for $4 billion, right? And needless to say, that was crazy times. Like we all celebrated. I remember Dana and Lorenzo Fertitta at the time had called a meeting to kind of celebrate with us. I actually still have the video on my phone to this day of like Lorenzo saying his kind of farewells to the company and everything. So that was a special time and special moment. But with that came a lot of rumors of layoffs, right? Because, you know, we're being bought by this, this behemoth in WME, right? And that's just kind of known in the corporate world. So we were starting to speculate who was going to get cut, who was going to get laid off, and what was going to happen, right? Everyone was feeling that, hey, likely the remote offices, right, our international offices may get let go, right? Because they kind of have a lot of core pieces outside, like internationally, and we felt like the U.S. team, including myself, would be laid and stay intact. However, I was wrong in that assumption. They ended up laying off, people across the entire company, but the U.S. sales group was affected, right? Myself, my boss, you know what I mean? Some other colleagues from my department, just because of redundancies, right? They already had those employees that did the same thing I did. So when Big Brother comes in, right, you got to get out of the room. So it was super like, I'd be lying if I say it like I wasn't like crushed by that, because I was super happy. Like I loved all my coworkers, right? I was doing well. I was successful living in Vegas, right? Like I felt like I was at the height of, I felt like I was in my prime. And if anyone knows what it feels like to get laid off, right, especially when you did nothing wrong, right? You're doing good, and it just becomes a complete shock, right? Like I remember people crying on that day, and shouting and stuff. And I interestingly have that video as well on the day that I got called and security came to like escort me out. So just like on the TV, I had my cardboard box full with my goodies, and I went to the car, man. Well, I went to the HR office. They gave me my little severance, and on my way. So I was left scrambling, right, not knowing what the fuck I was gonna do. And I luckily enough had some relationships, um, and I was interviewing with the Pepsi Center, Pepsi Center, right in Denver, Colorado, for Cronky Sports and Entertainment. And then I had some interviews with the Baltimore Ravens, and I was negotiating my contract with Cronky Sports, and I was picking out a place to go live in Denver. And then randomly one day I had moved in with my girl at the time, because I didn't have like any more money. I didn't know what I was going to do, jobless, right? I got a random call from CAA, right? And they said, hey, we heard about you from another person, and we rep a few athletes in the MMA space. And those athletes were GSP, Cain Velasquez, Rory McDonald, and I think TJ Dillashaw at the time, right? So big names in the sport, right? But if you know about CAA like WME is another global. It's the number one sports and entertainment agency in the world,
Right.
Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know who the fuck CAA was. I was negotiating my contract, ready to go to Denver, and then I came out to LA for an interview and went to the building of CAA in Century City on Avenue of the Stars, and it was the fanciest building I've ever seen in my life at the time. Like, no bullshit. I sent a picture to my parents, like, hey, this is a fancy building. Like, I think they do more than sports. It was all these people in suits walking back and forth. And after my interview, I was like, hey man, like this is a really cool, like, and then I did my research, right? I Googled who I met with, right? Who is, who they represent, and they rep everyone, and they, control Hollywood, and you know, it was just like I've never seen anything like it. So they offered me the job, and I just jumped at it because it was in Cali, right? It was in LA, right? So I grew up not too far from there, and it was for the biggest agency in the world. So I was super fortunate, super blessed. I'm still like shocked that they chose me. But yeah, I've been there 4 years now, and I've been building my you know, I kind of lead up the combat sports division, which is small in the grand scheme of things to the overall sports business. But you know, the resources that CAA has are just undeniable when it comes to getting people in movies and, you know what I mean, branding opportunities and endorsements and, you know what I mean, just contract negotiation. Like, so I've been a student at CAA and learned so much, man. So I'm just happy to kind of be there.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, CAA, like the names that you just dropped, I mean, those are legends in the sport. You got GSP, like, I
Right,
mean, it's those are like he's the guy. And then you
right,
got obviously Francis now,
yeah,
which is he's fighting March 27th for the heavyweight title, round two against Stipe. I mean, we got to jump into that and talk a little bit about that, obviously. I mean, Francis is a beast. He's knocking out everybody. He's almost like the Wilder of Deontay Wilder of the UFC.
right.
But what's different about this matchup now that you're with him? You've seen, you know, the changes he's made in camp and his training since the first matchup.
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely never try to take credit from a fight perspective, right? Like I'm an agent, right? So and I just try to, from a strategic standpoint, put him in the best position to succeed and make sure that alongside his kind of growth, I'm there and he's fully supported. And when the time is right, right, he's ready to become a superstar. And I feel like, you know, I don't take full credit. I give a lot of credit to just CAA in general. Also to him, also his team, his coaches. But you know, I think what's different is 3 years, right? When we're talking about the rematch from with Stipe, that's the true difference, right? And what you saw in that fight was an inexperienced Francis Ngannou, a raw power, right? And he was at the time, Francis was on a tear, right? He had knocked out Alistair Overeem, and you know what I mean. He was just kind of this monster, and then he came up against a very well trained and skilled fighter in Stipe, and I tip my hat off to Stipe. Like you know, you can't not like Stipe Miocic. You know what I mean? He's a good all around dude, like respectful guy, and especially when it comes to a sport that I feel is kind of lost this kind of respect in a lot of ways from a martial arts standpoint. But yeah, that fight, you know, Francis got dominated. You know what I mean? Like there's no ways around it. But also, and Francis will tell you to this day, he just didn't know, right? He didn't know what he didn't know, right? And for anyone to judge him off of that, you know, everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I would say, and of course I'm biased, you know, 3 years of training and having some time in the cage, not a lot of time because
Yeah.
knocking people out. But you know, the countless hours that I've gone to see him train with Eric Nixick out of Extreme Couture and Dewey Cooper. You know what I mean? They've gotten Francis to a point where I feel like he's probably at or getting ready to hit his prime. Like I, you'll only see probably after this fight or during this fight the amount of work that Francis and improvement that Francis has had. I like again, I don't pretend to be like an expert in fighting, like that's not my expertise, but I do know improvement from an athletic standpoint
Right.
and IQ standpoint from any athlete, because athletes just kind of recognize that.
Right.
And the determination and the willingness to learn from Francis has been unmatched. So I'm excited to see what happens during this fight, right? Of course, you think about what happened last time, and it's been 3 years since they fought, right? And yeah, man, I feel like it's his time. I really truly do. Like I think his story has aligned. I think his strength of schedule, like his last 4 fights have been a tough strength of schedule. Like in the football world, right? You look at the best college teams or have the best strength of schedule.
Right.
If you ask in terms of heavyweights, I'd stack up Francis' strength of schedule as being number 1. Period. He fought after he lost to Derek Lewis, right? He fought Stipe, lost, and had a snooze fest against Derek Lewis, right? Where I know personally, because he just told me, he was just like, my mind was just out of it. Like I was honestly thinking about the loss that he had from Stipe, right? And if you look back at the tape, like you can just see it. It just wasn't him. You know, he lost all his confidence, right? Because he was up on this pedestal, right, at one point in the UFC and the media's and the fans' eyes, and then he was buried, right? A professional athlete, when that media comes for you, when the promotion comes for you, or whatever, I challenge anyone to kind of face that and just be a-okay, right? And just come out stronger. So he lost those 2 in a row, and then he had Curtis Blades, who was on, I think, a 3 or 4 fight win streak.
He's a wrestler as well, right?
A dominant wrestler, right? Then after he beats Curtis Blades in the first round in Beijing, I was there, right? Then they call up and say, hey, how about Curtis Blades wasn't enough? How about Cain Velasquez?
Yeah.
And Cain Velasquez, just coming out of a short stint of retirement, was at the time, by and large, noted as the greatest heavyweight in UFC history,
right?
And a highly decorated wrestler. So, was that an ideal choice for us? No, but like from a strategic standpoint, like I needed and Francis needed to gain that confidence against wrestlers, right? And gain those confidence that, hey, like, bro, like you have everything it takes to be a star. You know what I mean? And to be the man, you got to beat the man.
Yep.
Right? So you fight Cain Velasquez, and we'll see what happens. So he beats Cain Velasquez first round. Everyone said it was a phantom this, phantom that, but no, he got caught. And I love Cain. I used to represent Cain, right? You know, great dude. I love Cain. Then after Cain Velasquez, sir, they put him up against Junior Dos Santos, another UFC heavyweight Hall of Famer, right?
Yep.
Who was on a 3-fight win streak, I believe, on a tear. And then Francis knocked him out. So then we're like, hey, I mean, give us the title.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, you know, Francis didn't prove enough. We're going to put you up against Rosenstrike, who was undefeated and was on a tear. So almost comparatively to like Francis's first run in the UFC in the stint was Jairzinho Rosenstrike, who had more experience at the time, right? If you're looking
at extreme power too. Yeah. Dangerous.
Extreme power, dangerous, right? And then Francis beats him in the first round. So all of those guys on tears. He didn't fight anybody that was on a downward trend, right? And he knocked all of them out in the first round. So then UFC had no choice but to give us this. So hey, do I know what's gonna happen? No. But am I confident? Absolutely, man. I back Francis till the wheels fall off. You know what I mean? Win or lose, I'm in his corner. But I just think it's his time.
Yeah, I mean, he's like you said. I mean, he's gone on an absurd tear, first round knockouts, all those big names. And I'm interested in hearing from you. Like you've been around GSP, Cain, guys who are top level athletes, obviously insane work ethic. But with Francis too, which has been highlighted recently on Joe Rogan, and even when you were on Tyson's podcast too, talked a little bit about Francis's backstory. But it's like a dude to come from where he came and is now, you know, at the top of the game, fighting for the title again. And he's really inexperienced. I mean, I shouldn't say inexperienced, but he's still relatively new in the sport. I mean, he was a late starter. What's it like for you being around a guy with that story and that work ethic? And like, how does that drive you in your business?
Man, it drives me like no other. It's extremely humbling, right? To be around him. I mean, signing him just in and of itself was no easy task, right? Like, and then you get to learn him not only on a business level but on a personal level, and we've grown to have an incredible friendship. And I admire Francis so much because I forget myself, like how good a lot of us have it, you know what I mean, in this world, especially particularly in this country, right? Like, and to know Francis's backstory, what he had to face and overcome, right? And like, if you know his story, man, it almost makes me emotional thinking about it, because I can see that his destiny is to be champion, right? Like, and again, I'm biased, but it's a storybook, right? It's a movie. His life is, I mean, you can't write a better story.
No.
Like like, you know, you get out of Africa, right? And to chase a dream, right? Then you start learning the dream in Paris, but you're homeless, right? And then you get discovered by the UFC, and you would think that that's the end of the movie. But no, here's that, right? Right. Then you're on this meteoric rise, right? In the UFC, the biggest and fastest growing company in the world. And you're on a tear, and you go up against the big boss, Stipe Miocic, and you lose, right? And it's embarrassing. And you get, and Dana says bad, negative things about you, and the media crushes you, and coaches and you know, start crushing you. And this guy then comes back, tries to fight, and loses again. Right? So he had every reason to just say, you know what, I made it, you know, here, I'm happy, you know, I can take care of my family a little bit, I don't need to be champion. But then he goes back, picks himself up, gets his mind right, gets changes his team, gets coaching, and goes back to work, right? Doesn't complain, right? Doesn't beg for this, doesn't beg for that. Again, doesn't complain because he's been through worse.
Right.
Right. And then now we're coming up on 3 years removed, the chance to fight that big boss again. Right? But now you're more skilled, right? You're mentally tougher, right? And now you have another crack at it, you know, so to speak. So to just be around Francis, man, it's just so humbling. Like, again, I'm truly honored to represent him and just be a part of his team, because he's fucking inspiring. Like, like if you're around him for 2 minutes, you're just like, damn, this dude is amazing. And he's such a good human being. Like, outside of the sport, forget his power, forget that. Like, the dude is super nice. I was just talking to the UFC. Sorry, I'm like long-winded, but I was just talking to one of the ladies at the UFC, an employee who I used to work with when I was there. And she was like, yeah, like Francis remembered my son's birthday and sent me a video just for my son. Right. And that's the Francis that I know. Like, he loves kids, like he's super playful. Right. And you guys will see more of that side of him. But that's what I'm hoping that people come out of this, right? Like, I firmly believe Francis Ngannou will be the heavyweight champion of the world. I believe that Francis, again, I mean, he's going to be the first African-born heavyweight champion in UFC history, maybe combat sports history. And again, you would know better in boxing, but was there an African-born boxing champion? Maybe.
Definitely a boxing champion, but in terms of heavyweights, I don't think that there is a African-born heavyweight champion. No, I don't think so. I'd have to double check that, but no, definitely on the lighter weight classes for sure, but in boxing, but heavyweight, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, again, like, you know, I know for sure other weight classes. Obviously, you got Kamaru Usman, who's amazing. Obviously, you got Izzy Adesanya. You know what I mean? But when it comes to heavyweight, right? When we're talking combat sports, heavyweight is king, right? I don't know who wants to argue that, but I sure wouldn't. Heavyweight is king. But when
Right.
I'm thinking of, hey, how many African-born heavyweight champions have there been in, major combat sports? I don't think there's been one.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And he's obviously the perfect guy to do it. And his story is obviously amazing. We could talk for hours about that. I encourage everyone to go check out those other podcasts to learn more about his rise from the sand mines to France, like you said. And, he was homeless when he was 27, 26. By that point in time in the fight game, particularly, to think that some guy's going to be fighting for the heavyweight title and he's, on a local circuit, homeless in France. That's just not real. It's not real. He has a movie story for sure. But on that Tyson podcast, I got to ask, because Francis, has talked a lot about his love for boxing. He always loved boxing coming up and wanted to be a boxer. But what was it like for Francis after the interview with Tyson? Maybe when he was talking with you about it, was he like still kind of in awe of Tyson, or was there behind the scenes talks about technique? I know he's done some stuff with Teddy Atlas as well.
Yeah, man. Yeah, great question. After the Mike Tyson podcast, and shout out my colleague Alex Avant, who's a legend. If you've seen the Black Godfather, it's actually about his father, Clarence Avant. Shout out the Avants, period. But he has been Alex was who's a CIA agent on the entertainment side, has known Mike Tyson forever. And, when it came to having the opportunity set up to where Francis was going to meet Tyson, Francis was kind of like shocked. He was just like in awe, right? And he had a great poker face while he was there. But I remember talking to him afterwards, after we did the podcast, and Tyson had showed him some moves, and right, they were playing with each other and stuff. And we were just talking about it, and he was just like, man, look at my life right now. You know what I'm saying? Like from him, he probably was just knowing about Mike Tyson through the radio or some shit. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
right. And
the Punch Out video game or something.
Well, not even that. I'm sure Francis never played video games. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Growing up, so he didn't know the Mike Tyson Punch Out like we all do here in the States, and like he didn't grow up probably watching the pay-per-views and stuff like that. But you just hear, and a legend such as Mike Tyson, right? That celebrity echoed throughout the entire world, right? Even in villages, right, in Cameroon, right, to a guy who never boxed a day in his life, but just had a dream named Francis Ngannou, right? So to fast forward through the years, and he's sitting across and right next to Mike Tyson, getting advice, getting pointers, and we left that, like, even me, I was just like, dude, like, you don't get a chance to be in what they call like rare air, right? Like,
Yeah.
like when you're in the space of greatness, you kind of just feel it. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And it was like that for Francis, and he was just like, man, that was amazing. That was so cool, So
Yeah, I can't imagine, because like I think of it like if I was in the same room with Francis right now, I would be feeling that, be like, oh my God, like this is the guy. But then for Francis to be feeling that, you know what I mean? It's just like those like levels of greatness. But that's what Francis really has in front of him. I mean, if you're looking at his UFC career, he could really stake his claim, amongst those legends, because he's very much, although I don't think like age wise he's particularly young, but like he is young in the sport.
right.
He's young and like he's a physical freak. It's not like he's going to start slowing down in a couple of years. I don't think so. So, by the end of his story, it's just like the sky is the limit for him.
Yeah, man, and I would have it no other way. You know what I mean? Like, yes, it's easy to say, we don't want to mess with Stipe, and hopefully Stipe loses so we don't have to fight him again or whatever. But no, he would have it no other way. I would have it than to have this rematch. You know what I mean? To face his own demons per se, right? Right, to face those insecurities, that embarrassment, whatever he felt at that time, that's what he's going to be facing, right? On top of the greatest heavyweight that we know of today in Stipe Miocic. So,
I
yeah, man,
can't wait, man. It's going to be
I
such a
can't,
good fight.
I really can't wait, man. Like, how could you write it up any better? And should Francis win, and let me say, no, when Francis wins, how are you going to deny him now? You know what I mean? I hope Francis gets every bit of respect and love coming his way, because he's earned it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not the easy way, not the, you know what I mean? Not taking any handouts. He had no fucking shortcuts. Please believe me when I tell you, you see a lot, and I won't name names, but you see a lot of guys get a lot of favors in the UFC. And Francis, at least within his last stint, again, talking about strength of schedule, there was no favors done.
No.
You know what I mean? He went through the lion's den. So he's going to face the biggest and the baddest on March 27th.
March 27th. Yep. I can't wait. Francis, I mean, I'm pulling for him. You can't hate on Stipe. He's obviously a great guy and he's a great champion, but man, I can't wait for that fight. It's such a cool matchup. And, I wish you guys all the best with that, obviously. But as far as other MMA guys, I have to bring up, GSP, another legend of the game. I mean, it's crazy. Like you're like right in the mix with all the top guys. It's unreal. But GSP, like, tell me a little bit about, I guess, the backstory there. Like, when did you start? You had him right from the jump, right, with CAA?
Yeah. So I don't take credit for signing CAA. Like with Francis, I personally signed him, right? Like when I came on to CAA, they were already representing him. So I was just another agent brought on to his team.
Gotcha.
Right. He has a team of like 7 or 8 agents, and he is by far and away the smartest fighter I've ever seen, ever known, or ever come across. His IQ is ridiculous, right? Like, and that's what I think makes him like the GOAT of all GOATs, right? There's many GOATs in every sport, but I feel like when you're talking the GOAT of all GOATs, in my mind, is GSP. In spending time with him, and just like I remember I was in his hotel room once, and he was just telling me about the body, right? About how the body reacts to food, how it reacts to sleep, right? Like deprivation and levels. And I'm just having like a casual conversation about like nutrition and me wanting to like lose weight or whatever. And the amount of knowledge he shared with me was like, dude, like you can be a nutritionist, right? And like, or a scientist or some shit like that, because that's how detailed he is, right? And it extends to everything in his life. He's very detailed. He's a student, right? People rag on him for like loving dinosaurs and accounting his experience of seeing, I think,
aliens,
or aliens, right? But no, like he's just a level above what like you and I and a lot of us can see as just kind of like we're on this level, and G is just in another realm. You know what I mean? And I say that with all respect and admiration, because he's just that smart. Like I almost compare it to like when you see other sports, names, Kobe Bryant's of the world, the LeBron Jameses, how they can dissect something, and when like sports are mic'd up and you hear them like in the huddle and they're
right,
breaking down this or breaking down this, like they see the play before it happens, or a Tom Brady who can just do that. That's what G is.
I want to see GSP do, I don't know if maybe he already has, but I want to see him do an episode of Detail on ESPN. DC does that, and Cormier does a great job, obviously, but maybe.
Cormier does an amazing job and an amazing commentator, but with all due respect to them, GSP blows them all out of the water when it comes to just fight IQ, and he can do it. I was recently I was just in a Clubhouse, Clubhouse, a new social media audio app. And he popped into the room. It was his very first time in Clubhouse. And for those few hundred people that were in that Clubhouse can attest, he was dropping gems, right? Like when it came to the fight game and preparation and how to train and how to spar and how to do this. And I was just like, yo, like he can really do a master class on all this in this fight game, but it's just like, gee, you got to catch him at the right time when he feels like displaying that, because he's very humble and just kind of like reserved. But if you ask him to do a deep dive, there's no one on his level.
He's still obviously so passionate about the game. And if you had to guess, I gotta ask, there's so many rumors about maybe he comes back. Maybe obviously that's up to him. But if you had to guess, do you think there's a chance that we see him in a super fight with Khabib, or maybe something at 170?
Unfortunately, like I doubt it, right? Because I don't really think, we all know it's really up to the UFC, right? Like in a perfect world, yes, we will see that fight. But there's so many factors, right? From when you're talking about GOATs, right? Is G, and there's Khabib, right? Khabib is undeniable, amazing, right? Another GOAT who I certainly respect, am a fan of, and I hope everyone else is a beast. But that to me is just the best fight you can possibly make. But unfortunately, because of the variables and different things at play, and I'm not blaming UFC, I'm not blaming anyone, but it may not just add up, right? Not only like, and I'm not talking about dollars, it's just like so many factors, right? You think of G and where he's at with his life, and he's getting older. There's perceptions of that, right? There's perceptions of, hey, there's active guys in the lightweight division, right, that maybe are deserving to fight Khabib, right? And then there's Khabib and his team and what they want to do, right? So I understand from not only a fan perspective, but from a business perspective, that some things, although they sound great, like logistically, could be a nightmare and may not just, sometimes you just got to know, like, okay, maybe that ship has sailed, right? Like with my fan cap on, I would say I want to see it. And also with my fan cap, I think it would be a master class in the octagon, watching the fight. But again, bias and otherwise, I think G wins that. Like, people will count against G. Hey, he's been out for so long. Hey, he's old, whatever. Need I remind you, he came back fresh out of retirement and beat Michael Bisping, right? At a different weight class. And when I tell you about his fight at IQ, age does not matter when it comes to G. If G had the time to prepare for Khabib, again, big fan of Khabib, a beast, a monster, right?
Yeah, right.
But G, I think, has the IQ well enough to know how to beat a guy like Khabib, right? It's just like when you see a Tom Brady. Tom Brady's what, 43 years old?
Right.
And people count him out, and somehow he just figures out how to beat, a Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, right? As dominant as they are, because GOATs are going to do GOAT shit, and they're going to figure out a way. And G ain't coming back unless he knows, right, that he has the recipe. And I personally just think he does.
Right. And that's a huge part of why I think, a lot of people are so attracted to that potential super fight is with Khabib. He just seems like he's getting better and better. And who's going to be able to match that? And it takes something obviously special, but like you said, the fight IQ, the ability to game plan around Khabib and figure something out, because everyone knows what Khabib's going to do, but they can't stop it. So if there's a guy that could do it, maybe it's GSP.
It's G, and it's not a physical thing. It's not, you know what I mean? You can't, you have to beat him from a cerebral level.
Right.
Oh, I saw Khabib. He said something like, I don't know if it was against Poirier. Did you see that? Poirier or Gaethje? He said, I knew he broke.
Right.
Right. Like I saw him like give up. When it comes to that mental fortitude, I would just love to see that fight, man. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed. But a couple more questions here before I let you go. But I did want to touch on also, obviously, I'm a big MMA fan. Also, of course, boxing. Is there anything that you could tell the people listening about Zuffa boxing? I know Dana White has talked a lot about it. If that was ever in the discussion when you were at UFC, if he ever kind of mentioned his willingness to get in. There's certainly enough promoters and enough networks and belts in boxing, but maybe Dana White's a guy who could get in and help clean it up.
Yeah, like again, from a business standpoint, like there ain't too many people that do it better than Dana, right? And knows how to promote and knows how to clean up and organize and just grow to an astronomical, place, like in a combat sport. So when I was there, or at least on my way out, I think there was rumblings of the Zuffa boxing space. And again, Dana is very ambitious, right? Like he's just smart. Like I think he's just forward thinking. When it came to even purchasing Zuffa, right, for UFC for $2 million way back then, right? He knew something, and he knew that he can make an unorganized, unsanctioned, right, kind of seen as brutal sport into this global entity to today. So knowing that, and to say that he can't improve boxing, you're just fucking ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about, right? Like I believe that if he gets into boxing, he knows how to do it, and it would be better for like kind of everyone in the space. The huge disparity is we all come back to, okay, well, UFC fighters don't make X and boxers do make X, right? But yet, in terms of me, and again, I didn't hear this or know this, but from the outside looking in, it seems like, again, UFC just may be very strategic when it comes to allowing the other promotions to turn over, right, their kind of holes, or reveal some of the holes and opportunity that in which a UFC is primed, and trust me, they'll be ready to strike, right, when the time is right, to move in and just be like, oh, okay, there's a hole here, hole here, hole here. Okay, we're welcome Zuffa boxing, but I know, again, from a business standpoint, it may not be financially worth it, right? In terms of, a lot of these contracts are tied up, and the promotions of it and the broadcast rights, like it's very confusing, right? Like I don't subscribe to be a boxing expert at all. I'm a huge fan of boxing and things like that. And I want Francis to have the opportunity to box one day, because I think he can and make a lot of money doing so. But the business just seems kind of like weird right now.
It's very weird. I mean, there's even in recent news, to bring this up. So we had, Teofimo Lopez, the lightweight king, and he's scheduled to fight Cambroso, a Australian fighter, in his next fight. He was originally with Bob Arum and Top Rank, and in recent news, they couldn't come to terms on the purse, and then it went to purse bid. Now Triller swooped in and threw $6 million at it. So now Triller's putting on the show. Obviously, Bob Arum is salty, and that's big news, because Triller, obviously, they just did the Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. fight. Now they have, this is going to be their first legit, active champion fighter, and who knows who they put on that card with them. It could be one of these crazy mixed cards as well. So Triller's making some big moves in the boxing game. But yeah, that's a understatement. The boxing space is a mess. So I can see why Dana White, could maybe hopefully come in and clean it up and get some real rankings, and maybe get rid of the alphabet soup they got going for the belts right now as well.
I know, man. Like it's so many belts and so many, it's mandatories and this and that and purse bids. It's like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know. Like I'll wait for the Ryan Garcias to fight or the Devin Haney's to fight, and Tyson Fury's, Anthony Joshua, those kind of guys. But other than that, like I can't even try to watch it because, like, again, like I'm jaded. I'm just like, okay, is this guy fighting the best, or which champion is he? Or, is this just a stepping stone? Or are we just padding the record? And I'm just like, whatever. Just let me know. Call me when it's like a mega fight, and then I'll come watch it.
And that's the biggest thing too. Like I'll mention quickly is like with boxing in the UFC, with Francis's story, right? He had no stay busy fights. And Canelo, who's fighting tonight in Miami, he's fighting a guy who has a solid record, but he hasn't fought in 3 years. And
really?
it's for the titles, and it is a stay busy fight. Canelo just beat Callum Smith, which is a good opponent. He's fighting Yildirim tonight, which is a good move around spar for him, basically. And then he wants to stay busy. So it's just a totally different kind of they just run differently.
Yeah, that's just so interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. Again, like Canelo's like amazing. I think a Canelo today beats the Floyd Mayweather of when Floyd beat Canelo. Does that make sense?
It does. The only variable there is the weight, because Canelo's grown tremendously. He's fought at 175 and recently, and tonight he's fighting, at his super middle at 168. So it's hard for me to ever pick against Floyd because it's just Floyd's that guy. But
yeah, I just like to talk shit. Yeah, Floyd.
Canelo. To your point though, Canelo is 100% pound for pound #1 in boxing right now.
Yeah. Maybe I should take that one back. Maybe he would beat Floyd, but it would certainly be a much more competitive fight. Right. Like I think like Canelo's just defensive prowess is just like
he learned a lot from that fight.
Yeah, like amazing. You know what I mean? So but yeah, like I won't watch that fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're hardcores, but again, call me when it matters. You know what I mean? Call me when I really care to see or think that somebody can beat this dude,
Right. And that's the
guy, but
exactly. That's the problem. So hopefully, things can start to change in the future of boxing. But I'll end with this. I got a big sweet tooth as well. I know you're a big cookie guy. You had a little cookie business going on. So when Francis gets this W March 27th, then you're the next day you got the cookie tray out. What are we going for? Are we just going to classic chocolate chip, or where are we going here?
All right, you got to just do the staples. Don't complicate it. It's chocolate chip, peanut butter, oatmeal raisin. Then you throw in maybe a few sugars, and then you got to have, I would say for kind of the fifth, maybe like a cinnamon sugar or something like exotic. But just stick with the staples. You know what I mean? If you try to get too crazy, people get overwhelmed and won't even touch the tray. But I will be indulging, when he wins, and we will be celebrating, to the morning. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thanks so much for the time today. I had a lot of fun talking with you. I think the listeners will enjoy it. So thanks so much. And please give a shout out where they can follow you, or Francis as well. Any news before the fight in a couple weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate it. You can follow me on Instagram at Marquel, MARQUEL _Martin, MARTIN. That's all my social media handles. Obviously, you can follow Francis and should follow Francis at Francis Ngannou. And yeah, man, stay tuned. Definitely, buy the pay-per-view on ESPN Plus, right? March 27th, UFC 260, Francis Ngannou versus Stipe Miocic, the GOAT heavyweight, the current GOAT heavyweight. And stay tuned. The next day, we will be announcing, and looking back on how Francis became the first African heavyweight champion in UFC history.
Let's go. Let's go. Well, I appreciate it, man. Thanks.
Thanks, Patrick.